Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today, we're doing another consumables tier list, and today we're talking about potions. Potions are one of the most powerful mechanics available in Baldur's Gate 3. For almost no opportunity cost, you get a massive benefit. They cost you some gold, and usually a bonus action or a throw to consume, so you can use them to add power to your character essentially for free. Many characters won't otherwise have important uses for their bonus actions, so potions that you use are just free real estate for your character to occupy. You can gain a significant boost without any real expenditure of resources because gold is relatively easy to stockpile, so knowing which potions to collect, which ones to buy from merchants, and which ones to carry can be instrumental in making your party more powerful. Also, hopefully, if you, like me, suffer from pack rat syndrome and end the game with thousands of potions in your inventory, this video can give you some ideas of how and when to use them and maybe make you feel a little bit better about using potions. Something I hear a lot from people is that consumables in video games give them anxiety because they feel like they are wasting resources that they need later. And one thing that I think is pretty useful about knowing which potions are good and when to use them is getting over that hurdle and making sure that you're using the resources that the game gives you. Potions are really interesting and actually somewhat difficult to rate. In fact, I think I am maybe the first person who has done a potions tier list because I had to make this tier maker. I couldn't find one online, and that's very rare for Baldur's Gate stuff. Usually there's something that somebody else has done. And the reason for that is the extremely low opportunity cost. When we talked about elixirs in my last consumables tier list, there's a clear opportunity cost for using an elixir. Every time you use an elixir, it means that you aren't using a different elixir. Potions don't have that problem because they're almost free to use and consume because you can stockpile lots of them from merchants and they don't take an action, they stack all with each other. So rating them is really interesting. For that reason, I've gone with 6 different tiers for our potions. So in S+ tier, I'm placing potions that are just game-breakingly powerful. These potions will be fight-winning on their own and are definitely something that you should grab and use at every occasion. In S tier, I'm placing potions that every character wants to stockpile as many of as possible because they're so useful in combat and just so powerful to have available to your party. In A tier, I am placing potions that every party should try to have at least 1 or 2 of around because they will come up sometimes, but it's not something that you really need to go out of your way to grab. Having a few of these in your inventory will be helpful for when they come up, and you should try to remember that they exist. In B tier, I'm placing ones that give you relatively minor boosts, usually by allowing you to access different story content that you might not otherwise be able to. Often these effects are replaceable with spells, but sometimes using a potion can help save a spell slot, which is a pretty important use for a potion. +1 spell slot, again, like we talked about with the elixirs of Arcane Cultivation, is a very powerful effect, so saving an important spell slot by using a potion instead can be very useful. In C tier, I'm placing potions that have very marginal effects. These are either like story events that only come up once during the game, or they address a problem that you will almost never have, and are otherwise not particularly important to keep around, so you can usually pretty safely sell these. And in F tier, I'm placing ones that are actively harmful and you should never use them. Also, a quick note on what we are and are not covering in this tier list. I'm counting everything that the game classifies as a potion that you can drink that has a temporary or day-long effect or cures a condition, something along those lines. I'm not counting unique potions, so we're not counting any of the unique potions that you can find, including the hag potions. Since you can only get 1 each of those, it doesn't make sense to talk about whether you should try to stockpile them for your characters. And I'm also not counting alcohol. I will be counting the drugs that you can buy later on in the game because these work exactly the same as potions with some minor mechanical differences. And I will not be counting the Potion of Sleep because despite the game calling it a potion, it's actually a grenade. It only has offensive effects and doesn't do anything positive, at least when you drink it. Finally, I will also be covering the Elixir of Universal Resistance, because despite being called an elixir, it's actually a potion. It doesn't take your elixir slot and only lasts 10 turns. Seems like a potion to me. Finally, before I begin, I do want to say thank you so much to Xteen for the $5 donation and Roheat for the $5 donation, as well as Bobby Beefaroni for becoming a channel member. Thank you so much, my friends. I really do appreciate the support, and it really does mean a lot. Alright, let's rate some potions. First up, the Potion of Animal Speaking. So this one does exactly what it says on the tin. It gives you speaks with animals for the entire day. It lasts until long rest, and unlike most potions, cannot be thrown, so you can't throw this at an ally, and you can't throw it at an enemy in order to make them speak with animals, which would be a pretty funny condition to inflict on an enemy, but obviously that's not a significant downside to this potion. You know if you need this potion, right? If you don't have speak with animals as a spell known, or a spell that you can prepare on your character who is going to be doing that, then you want to stockpile this potion. Most of the time, speaks with animals is a pretty real mechanical benefit. There's some quests where it can allow you to avoid difficult skill checks or give you options that you wouldn't otherwise have. It's primarily a role-playing tool, but there are some real mechanical benefits of this spell, and the ability to drink this potion can save you spell slots or save you having to learn this spell as a spell known, not save you spell slots because it's a ritual spell, but can save you spells prepared or save you having to learn this spell as a spell known. For example, if your main character is a bard, you get to know a whole extra level 1 spell if you replace learning the spell with just using potions of this spell instead. So it's a real mechanical benefit to your characters to have it. It comes up relatively frequently all throughout the game. It's fairly easy to stockpile enough of these to last you the entire game and never have to actually cast Speak with Animals, and it can let characters that normally don't get access to the spell do it, so all of those things are pretty useful. Overall, a relatively minor benefit, but definitely worth picking up these when you see them. You probably shouldn't sell them because they will come up pretty frequently, and so I'm going to put it in B tier. I think it gives you a pretty significant boost to your overall party effectiveness to have this spell, either through additional spells known or the ability to gain the benefits of talking to animals, but it's still mostly a role-playing choice, so B tier feels right to me. The Potion of Antidote. So, an antidote can be used to remove poison, and it removes both the poisoned condition and any other condition that's inflicted by things that are classified as poisons, so weapon poisons in particular, but also a lot of environmental hazards count as poisons, and there's a few relatively debilitating conditions that this can get rid of, although some of them can be removed in other ways, like the sleeping poison. You can just wake them up, because sleep is easy to remove in this game, but other poisons are more difficult to remove, and Antidote can get rid of them. There's also some day-long poisons, or poisons that last until long rest, or until you have an antidote, and so having these stockpiled can be pretty helpful. If you forget to use these in combat, honestly, it won't usually be devastating to your party. Even though the poison condition is relatively debilitating, having disadvantage on everything is pretty bad, most of the time you can fight through it pretty easily, and there's a lot of ways to preempt poisons, either by not walking into the traps or clouds or whatever that inflict them, or by taking out enemies before they can hit you with poisoned weapons, and that will typically be a better strategy than trying to remove the poison after it's been applied. But as a panic button, an antidote is pretty good to have around, and so I think that most parties should strive to carry 1 or 2 of these throughout an adventuring day. Again, if you forget to use these, it won't be a particularly big deal, so I'm going to put it in B tier rather than A tier, but I think that these are useful to have around, and you should try to have like 1 or 2 of them available and use them when they come up, and they will give you a moderate but real bonus. The Basilisk Oil. So Basilisk Oil can be used to revert any creature that's been petrified back to its normal form. So anything that's been turned to stone, you can turn back to a person again. This will never come up in combat. While there are technically enemies that can petrify you, the likelihood of that happening is extremely low, so you just won't use this in combat. Instead, it's exclusively for story events. If you are a completionist, you're going to want this in order to access a few pieces of dialogue that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access, but otherwise the mechanical benefits of the Basilisk Oil are extremely low. The story events that you can access through this are very rare and don't give you significant benefits. I think there's like a couple pieces of loot that you can get with Basilisk Oil that you can't get otherwise, but even those, I think, tend to have other ways to achieve them. And other than that, there's no real mechanical benefit to carrying Basilisk Oil. For story events, it can be worth having around, and so there are some cases where you might want it just to hear a piece of dialogue that you wouldn't otherwise hear, but in terms of actual mechanical benefit, it's not going to be significant. C tier, you don't really need to worry about Basilisk Oil in Baldur's Gate. The Potion of Featherfall. So this gives you 10 turns worth of Featherfall and prevents falling damage, exactly the same as the Featherfall spell. That means that it replaces a ritual spell, so a spell that costs no resource to cast, and it's a level 1 ritual spell that's widely available to a lot of classes. In particular, if you have a wizard, you are unlikely to need too many potions of Featherfall, because the wizard will just learn it from a scroll and then can prepare and cast it anytime that you need it outside of combat. And the potions seem like they're going to have in-combat uses if you have a character who's stuck on high ground, but unfortunately, the way that they interact with the action economy means that that actually doesn't help that much. Since they take a bonus action to drink, and it takes a bonus action to jump down from a high place, you can't just like walk off a ledge, you can't both use the Featherfall potion and jump down in the same turn. So the chances of you actually being able to use this to get down safely from a high place are low. Even if you need that effect, like let's say you have a barbarian who misty stepped up to a really high area in order to kill an enemy who's on high ground and then needs to get back down, the Featherfall potion won't help with that because you'll have to do that and then drop back down on your next turn, and it will require 2 bonus actions, one to get up and one to get back down, plus an additional one for the Featherfall potion, so you can't do it all in the same turn cycle. So what that means is that Featherfall potions are mostly for parties that don't have access to it from another character. In other words, do not include a wizard, and also don't have a character who's taken it, and need the Featherfall option in order to get around outside of combat. Now, getting around outside of combat with Featherfall is really good, actually. I'm a huge proponent of Featherfall as a spell that you take in the game, because it can let you bypass large sections of dungeons, avoid a lot of traps, plus it's a great quality of life item. It just saves you a lot of time getting down from ledges or high places without taking damage, and that just saves you time watching your little guys running around the map while you twiddle your thumbs. So all of those things make it a pretty powerful tool to have outside of combat. It's just that you will almost certainly have better access to this from a character who can prepare and cast it, or just be able to stockpile enough of these and scrolls that you can use them when you need them. Featherfall potions will come up sometimes for parties that don't have a wizard, but aren't really useful in combat for the action economy reasons that I talked about, and outside of combat you'll often have better ways to get this effect. Even so, I think that the effect is quite powerful, and you should stockpile Featherfall potions, because bypassing large sections of dungeons, avoiding traps, getting down from high places, and pre-casting it before combat in case you need to fight enemies on high ground are all pretty reasonable things that you can do with a Featherfall potion. I'm going to say that it comes up reasonably frequently, but not incredibly frequently, so we're going to put it also in B tier. The Potion of Gaseous Form. So this is exactly the same as the level 3 spell of the same name, and turns you into a cloud of gas. The Gaseous Form potion is primarily used for story events, to fit through the holes that your character is too large to fit through otherwise. By turning into a cloud of gas, you can fit through the cracks or pipes or whatever that are available. Now, these story events give you a lot of alternate ways to do them usually, and Gaseous Form is only one of them, but it's an okay way to do most of these story events. However, even despite this spell not being terribly useful in combat, there are a lot of other uses for it, and there are some cool combat uses. While I would rarely recommend preparing and casting this with a level 3 spell, when you get it from a potion, which is a much, much cheaper way to get this effect, it's much more interesting. For example, a gaseous formed character has resistance to all damage and can be used to bait enemies into, let's say, an Evard's Black Tentacles or other surface effect. Since you're permanently flying when you're in gaseous form, you're immune to surface effects. So you can hover over lava or Evard's black tentacles, and enemies will aggro to the gaseous formed character because you have low AC, and will get themselves trapped in those surface effects. You can pull them into certain areas. You can have your characters reach areas they wouldn't otherwise be able to reach across, say, a pool of lava or a pool of acid. Obviously, there's lots of other ways to reach those areas, but there's still a lot of uses for this spell. You can use it to get through iron grates or doorways that otherwise are inaccessible to your character. You can just path right through them. As long as it's not a solid door, you can just go straight through it with gaseous form, so a gateway or something like that, and you can use that to cheese certain enemies by getting them trapped on the wrong side of gateways. You can seal them off then with arcane lock and so on, and then shoot them through the gateways. There's a lot of uses for this spell that are limited mostly by your creativity. And normally the problem is just that it's a huge resource expenditure to use this spell, but when the potion exists, you can use it as a bonus action, so you can still take an action and then turn into a gas in order to gain the benefits of the gaseous form spell on your turn, and you can also use it without expending a spell slot. So the resource usage requirements for using it as a potion are significantly reduced. For that reason, I like the gaseous form potions quite a lot. There's a lot of creative uses. It's great for some story events, and you can use it to do all kinds of things in certain locations that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. You can use it because it lets you hover to become immune to surface effects, which is useful in a lot of spaces, and I recommend experimenting with this potion if you haven't tried it otherwise, because the effect is quite powerful, and what holds it back normally is the resource expenditure. Potions let you bypass that. So I'm going to place it in A tier. I think that most parties should carry at least one of these, because there are a lot of cases where you will find that it will be very useful, whether for story events or because you have a creative use, bypassing traps, immunity to surface effects, going through doors, and so on. All of those are great. A tier for the gaseous form potion. The Potion of Glorious Vaulting. So this is exactly the same as the Enhanced Leap spell. It gives you triple your jump distance. And similar to the Featherfall potion, the problem with this is that it takes a bonus action to drink and a bonus action to jump, so you can't use it in the same turn that you want to jump. However, you can precast this before combat, and it increases your mobility massively. Enhanced Leap is a ritual spell, but one that is very much worth learning for every party, because it increases your mobility so heavily. It's effectively the same as getting free Misty Step on all of your party members if you have Enhanced Leap available regularly for your party, and the Potion of Glorious Vaulting is one way to do this. Repositioning is an incredibly powerful tool, and so having the access to Enhanced Leap just for bonus mobility in various combats is massive. It also, of course, is very useful to access story events or access areas that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get, to make sure that your party is all on high ground before a fight, to sneak around areas without attracting the attention of people by getting up high so that you're out of their lines of sight, and so on. The Glorious Vaulting Potion, similar to the Gaseous Form Potion, lets you or the Featherfall potion, lets you bypass a lot of areas of dungeons and bypass a lot of story events. You can also use it as a quality of life tool to avoid having to run around a lot. There's a lot of location it's in the game where this just makes traversing them much faster, so if you're speed running or just don't like wasting your time, you can use the Glorious Vaulting Potion to help out with that. The combat uses of this spell, though, are actually immense. The ability to reposition your party with a single jump to basically anywhere on the field for 10 full turns is incredible, because even a character with minimum jump distance can suddenly have a very respectable jump if they drink a Glorious Vaulting Potion. Normally, you would want to precast Enhanced Leap on your party in order to make use of this, but that both takes a lot of clicks and is something that you won't always have access to in every party, although it is something that you should strive for. I think that the Glorious Vaulting Potion is excellent, so not only does it let you bypass a lot of areas that you wouldn't bypass traps, get to areas you wouldn't otherwise access. It also has a ton of in-combat uses. Repositioning is very, very powerful. I don't think that it quite cracks S tier, but I think it is a solid A tier potion that you should definitely keep an eye out for, because Enhanced Leap is a powerful combat buff that you can pre-cast before combat and get a lot of benefit from it, so definitely worth picking up for every party. And you should try to have a few of these around for story events and stuff as well. If you have an important combat, or a combat in an area with a lot of verticality, it just gives you a lot more options. A tier for this. Healing potions. So healing potions come in 4 varieties, and I'm going to go through each of them in turn. The basic healing potion does 2d4 plus 2 healing for an average of 7 points of healing per use of a healing potion. Maximum of 10, minimum of 4, but it's going to tend towards the middle because you're more likely to get results near the middle when you're rolling multiple dice. So 7 hit points for a bonus action is pretty good. It's basically a healing word that you can only cast on yourself, and that is a very powerful spell. And it can be used to get you out of range of an enemy attack by raising your hit points past the threshold of dying in a single attack. Let's say you have 20 hit points remaining. 7 hit points will often mean an enemy needs to make multiple successful hits instead of only a single successful hit in order to bring you down. And so healing potions are a free way to increase the longevity of your characters in combat, as long as you don't have other uses for your bonus action. Many characters won't have other uses for their bonus actions for later turns of combat, and so drinking healing potions is a great way to do that. They're also extremely useful for maintaining your health points outside of combat. Turning gold into hit points is great. It's a great trade. It lets you just have your adventuring days go longer, and you can just heal back to full with healing potions most days because they're very cheap. You find them everywhere. You can stockpile them, and so this will let you continue to adventure for much longer even if you're taking damage. You can also, because 7 hit points, while it's not that much on its own, is enough to get a downed ally back to their feet, throw them at a downed ally in order to bring them back to life when they have been knocked unconscious in combat. That is very powerful. It's an extremely useful panic button. Being able to trade your action, for most characters, unless you're a berserker barbarian, to bring a character back up to their feet is really powerful, and for many characters the throw action only takes one of their attacks, so it doesn't actually require you to spend your entire turn doing it. This panic button is very useful even on into the very, very late game, and even the small amounts of healing provided by healing potions are enough to activate it, and so it's going to be incredibly powerful to have healing potions on every one of your characters. I don't think it's going to come as a surprise to anyone that I'm recommending you carry healing potions. The game obviously gives you some from the beginning. Everybody knows healing potions are good, but the number of different uses that they have, both for level 1 use of just keep making your character last longer in combat, level 2 use of making your character take one more hit to bring down in combat, as well as additional uses of bringing allies back to their feet or healing outside of combat, means that healing potions are indispensable. You want to carry as many of them as you can, and they're going straight into S tier. The Potion of Greater Healing. So the Greater Healing Potion heals 4d4 plus 4, as opposed to the healing potion's 2d4 plus 2, so exactly twice as much for an average of 14 healing. Obviously, that's strictly better, and spending a bonus action to heal 14 is better than spending a bonus action to heal 7. However, it is worth noting that 14 points healed in combat is not usually going to be significantly different than 7 points healed in combat. By the time that you're regularly using greater healing potions, most enemies will just be doing enough damage that the difference between 7 hit points healed and 14 hit points healed is not going to equal more attacks from enemies in order to take you down. And so the greater healing potion, when used like to revive an ally, will typically leave them still at 1 hit from death. When used to try to push you over a threshold so you take multiple hits from an enemy, will often not do that any better than the healing potion. Sometimes it will, of course, and you will, of course, slowly replace your healing potions with a superior versions, or with the improved versions. But the Greater Healing Potion at the point where you get it is just not a meaningful enough upgrade for me to go out of my way to try to upgrade to Greater Healing Potions. It's still, of course, strictly better than the Healing Potion, and I don't want to take away from that, but I'm going to put it in A tier because I just don't think it's worth going out of your way to try to upgrade that much. The ones that you find you're going to use, but you're not necessarily going to spend money buying these or try to craft them specifically. It's also worth noting that the Greater Healing Potion is more expensive to craft than to buy. The ingredients cost more than the finished product, which is kind of funny. So I'm going to put it in A tier. If you really want to amuse yourself, also, you can go look in the comments and see all the people who are mad about this, because I'm sure many people will be angry that I put a strictly better version of something in a lower tier, but it's important that you pay attention to these things contextually, not just in terms of their raw effect, and so that's why it's going in A tier. So, Greater Healing Potion, A tier potion. The Potion of Superior Healing. So this one gives you 8d4 plus 8, so is double the Greater Healing Potion, or 4 times the healing of the Potion of Healing, for an average healing of 28. That's a lot, actually. 28 hit points is more than most healing spells will give you. It's almost half what you get from the level 6 spell Heal, and is more hit points than most even dedicated healers are passing out with their actions, let alone with their bonus actions. For that reason, the Superior Healing Potion is actually a pretty efficient way to heal in combat, and if you have 2 or 3 of these, you can tank through a lot more incoming damage than you would be able to without them. They will mean that your characters can absorb many, many more attacks from enemies, because they will simply be able to just tank through it. You're a little bit at the mercy of the dice, because so much of the average healing comes from dice rolling, and so if you do get unlucky on the Superior Healing Potion's die roll, you can end up with fairly low hit points healed, but for the most part, this is going to be a pretty significant boost to your character's survivability, especially when combined with any effects that improve your hit point longevity, like Blade Ward or damage resistances and so on. And so the Superior Healing Potion is, I think, an excellent option that you can use to make sure that your characters stay alive in combat way, way longer than they would otherwise. And because you will be able to purchase or craft these pretty regularly, you can end up with quite a stockpile of them going into the end game. And I definitely recommend doing that. They are as powerful, or obviously more powerful than the healing potion, but they have all of the uses of the lower level healing potions, plus the fact that they give you so much healing means that you're just going to actually be able to use them to heal in combat, something that Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't usually let you do. So the Superior Healing Potions are, I think, excellent and are going straight into S tier. The Potion of Supreme Healing. So the Supreme Healing Potion gives you 10d4 plus 20, which isn't double the Superior Healing Potion, so it breaks the pattern, but what it loses in raw numbers, because it doesn't quite double, it makes up for in being incredibly reliable. 10d4 plus 20 is an average of 45 points of healing, with a maximum of 60 and a minimum of 30, and so that is an extremely reliable amount of healing, and of course 45 healing is an absurd amount for a consumable item. That's going to be like half of your character's hit point pool a lot of the time. So not only can Supreme Healing be used in all the other ways that healing potions can be used, it will allow you to basically undo a major attack from an enemy. Late game spells that enemies are casting, like an AoE spell cast at high level, will often do around 45 damage, or a full turn of attacks from a moderately strong enemy can be 45 to 60-ish damage, and so being able to heal all that back up with a single bonus action is ludicrously powerful. The Supreme Healing Potion gives you not only just an incredible amount of sustainability in combat, it means that you can put your characters in dangerous situations much more easily, and a character who goes down and gets healed back up to 45 with a Supreme Healing Potion has regained like half of their hit point bar from being fully dead, which is pretty incredibly powerful. The ability to do this all with a bonus action without spending spell slots is awesome and absolutely worth carrying as many of these as you can possibly find or craft. They will allow you to tank through incoming damage with extreme reliability. They will keep your characters alive in really bad circumstances. You can use them proactively. You can plan to use them proactively when you have area of effect damage that your characters might be taking either from enemies or from environmental hazards or even from your own area of effect damage if that happens. And they're not even that hard to get because you will be able to buy them starting in Act 1. You can purchase these potions, and then they're available throughout the rest of the game. Stockpiling these can totally break the hit point economy of the game. It gives you massive out of combat healing and massive in combat healing, and they're going all the way up to S tier, S plus tier. The reason that this is so powerful, incidentally, is that it uses the numbers from the tabletop version of the item unchanged, but in Baldur's Gate 3, drinking a healing potion is a bonus action. In tabletop, it's an action, so it's significantly easier to do in Baldur's Gate 3. And also, a supreme healing potion is something that in most tabletop campaigns you would find like one of in a dragon's hoard or for a princely sum at a shop in a major city, something along those lines, something that would be very rare and would be a big deal if you needed to drink it. In Baldur's Gate 3, you'll end up with them coming out your ears. And so this is just an incredibly powerful tool for your party to have available, both because it's easier to use than in tabletop and you'll get more of them. And that's where Baldur's Gate 3's most powerful mechanics often come from, is using the numbers from tabletop items unchanged when the base mechanics of using that item has been changed significantly. So if you're wondering why this item is so powerful, that's why. The Potion of Mind Reading. So this gives you Detect Thoughts, exactly like the spell, so this is another one that replaces a spell that's used for certain story events or certain dialogue choices. Obviously this has no use in combat, but it is still pretty useful in some dialogue options. Detect Thoughts is mostly used to bypass skill checks, and it can be used to bypass some fairly difficult skill checks if you have access to Detect Thoughts. So the ability to have this on a character that wouldn't be able to cast it otherwise can be pretty nice if you have a party face that would otherwise not have Detect Thoughts. Now, Detect Thoughts requires you to roll a Wisdom or Intelligence check in order to use it, so some Charisma-based characters will not be able to make great use of it, even if they have the spell. But other than that, it is still a reasonably useful spell in general that can help you bypass some conversation options that you might not be able to make the skill checks for, especially if you don't have a dedicated party face who is good at making dialogue checks. It replaces a ritual spell, so it's another one that doesn't actually save you spell slots, but importantly, Detect Thoughts, the spell itself is concentration, so using the potion can free up your concentration or prevent you from breaking concentration if you have another day-long concentration buff running. Overall, this is a minor boost, and similar to Animal Speaking, it is going to come up very occasionally, and because it replaces a spell is reasonable, but if you need it and don't have the spell, it can be useful, so we're going to put it in B tier. The Potion of Vitality. So the Potion of Vitality is an upgraded potion of Antidote, basically. It is the same as Antidote in that it cures any poison or the poisoned condition, and it also cures any diseases. There are not that many diseases in Baldur's Gate 3, so the second half of this potion won't come up that regularly, but it is just a strictly upgraded version of the Antidote potion. Is that worth going out of your way to upgrade to? Honestly, not really. There just aren't that many diseases, but it's at least as good and sometimes better, and so I'm just going to put it in B tier because I think that you will end up doing kind of exactly the same thing with the Vitality Potion as you did with the Antidote Potion and just carrying around whichever ones you happen to find, but not really going out of your way to get them. You'll be happy to have it when you need it, but it's not something that you really need to specifically seek out, so B tier potion. The Potion of Speed. So the Potion of Speed gives you haste for 3 full turns. Afterwards, like when the normal haste spell ends, or if you lose concentration on haste, you fall into a lethargy and get stunned for 1 turn, unable to do anything. But for 3 turns, you get an additional action. On Tactician mode or below, this action benefits from extra attack. On Honor mode, it only gives you a single extra attack, but 1 extra attack per turn is obviously an incredible benefit, and for spellcasters, or in particular warlocks, who can use Eldritch Blast just fine with this extra extra action, it is a massive benefit to your characters. An extra action per turn in the early game effectively doubles your character's efficiency, and in the late game is still at least a 50% increase to most characters' efficiency, even if they're weapon attackers, and for spellcasters is going to still double their ability to act in combat. Getting 6 turns in your first 3 turns of combat is incredible and is going to just break the action economy of the game in half. Being able to do this with a potion is massive because it means that you don't have to spend your concentration on it. You are not at risk of having your concentrating character lose concentration and stun you, and you're also not at risk of accidentally casting another concentration spell and stunning your ally, something which I have certainly never done and never will. For the Potion of Speed, you are going to want to stockpile as many of these as possible and use them for important fights. They are incredibly powerful, and they will stop you from otherwise losing fights. They will put you in winning positions in just about every fight because extra actions are awesome. Baldur's Gate combat, or Dungeons & Dragons combat, is effectively an exercise in trying to make your opponents take as few turns as possible. Taking more turns yourself is one easy way to do that because you just get more turns relative to them, and the speed potion makes you better at it. In addition to that, it also gives you the other benefits of haste, the armor class and the movement speed, which are very good benefits themselves. 3 turns is plenty to end most combats in with the speed potion, so the benefits so you will not usually get the lethargy stun. That is a real downside, and there are some cases where it's going to be somewhat difficult to make use of this, especially for characters that have important uses for their bonus action, and so would want to cast this before combat starts, want to drink this before combat starts. They will maybe only get 2 turns of haste out of it, or for characters that use it at the beginning of combat and a fight unexpectedly goes long, you can get stunned. But even if you get stunned after using the Potion of Speed, you're still up 2 full turns compared to the turn that even after you account for the turn that you lost. So the Speed Potion is always going to be an incredible bargain, and of course goes into S+ tier. I don't think there's anybody who's going to be surprised about that. This is the #1 potion that's talked about in character optimization, and so is just going to be very important for every party to have as many of these as possible. You want to craft them, you want to buy every single one that you see, and you want to stockpile them on every character that you possibly can if you're going for the maximum strength of party. The Remedial Potion. So this one cures blindness, silenced, paralyzed, and poisoned, although it's worth noting that if you cure silenced but are inside a silence spell, it won't do anything. It's only if you've been silenced by an actual, effect that silences you. And, of course, you can't drink it yourself if you're paralyzed. You would need an ally to apply it to you. Paralyzed is the worst of these conditions, but blinded and poisoned, of course, are pretty bad conditions as well that you will want to remove if they happen, and because it covers a large variety of conditions, this one is pretty useful to have around. A panic button to remove paralyzed from an ally can stop them from just getting obliterated by guaranteed critical hits. The ability to remove blinded and poisoned from yourself with a bonus action is pretty powerful in some arenas, and so I think that the Remedial Potion is similar to the Antidote Potion or the Vitality Potion, quite useful, but because it has a wider array of options for what you can do with it, it is typically the one of these 3 that you're going to want to carry. Antidote and Vitality also do a good impression of the Remedial Potion, and of course can cure diseases or poison effects that aren't to the actual poisoned condition, but the Remedial Potion covers most of the worst conditions that you're going to face in the game. It can be used on an ally who's paralyzed, which is in effect a condition that you both really, really want to get rid of, and that a lot of enemies will attempt to inflict, and gets rid of blinded and poisoned, which are conditions that don't come up that often in-game, but are very useful to be able to remove when you can. I recommend that every character try to carry one of these, or every party try to have at least a couple of these distributed over their party, because the Remedial Potion is just a great panic button, and it's one that you will always be happy to have when you need it. I'm going to put it in A tier because I don't think you really need to go out of your way to stockpile these, but definitely a good thing to craft when you're crafting potions, and a good one to buy if you happen to be able to, and one that you should just carry on as many characters as possible. I don't know if you can hear the motorcycle revving outside. Sorry about that. If that came through on the recording, someone is street racing or something. But That was very distracting. But remedial potions, they're pretty good. A tier. The potion of Angelic Reprieve. So this puts your character to sleep for 2 full turns, and notably cannot be thrown. So you can't use it on an ally, you can't use it as a grenade to put enemies to sleep. You have to use it on the character who's actually got it equipped. If they stay asleep for those 2 full turns, they wake up with the benefits of a short rest, so they get all their short rest abilities back and get half their hit points back, and they recover all of their first and second level spell slots. Using this in combat is pretty difficult. Stunning one character for 2 full turns is pretty tough to arrange. Although there are definitely some circumstances where it can be useful. You can have a character who's totally out of resources, cast it, and then put Sanctuary on them to stop them from getting hit. Stuff like that. You can give the character a lot of additional longevity as a result of that if you desperately need resources in combat, but mostly this is going to be used out of combat to extend the length of your adventuring day. It's especially useful for warlocks, for whom a short rest represents all of their spell slots back, or for sorlocks, who can turn all their first and second level spell slots into sorcery points, turn all their warlock spells into sorcery points, and then get all of those back with the Angelic Reprieve potion to gain a lot of sorcery points that they can then use for the rest of the day. This is this is less powerful for other short rest based characters, like a fighter spending 2 turns to get action surge back is obviously negative on turn value, so you're mostly going to be using this on spellcasters who actually really care about the benefits of the first and second level spell slot restoration. But this is still a pretty useful ability, especially if you have spent your resources unevenly throughout the adventuring day, like one character has spent way more resources than the others and just needs a short rest, or if one character is just really hurt and you're out of other potions, this can be useful to bring them back in terms of out-of-combat healing. The Angelic Reprieve potion, therefore, I think is pretty useful, especially if you like to go for a long time between long rests. It will let you use your first and second level spell slots more regularly in combats and restore them, and is just a very powerful tool to be able to gain back your short rest abilities. I'm going to put it in A tier, although I will say that if you never use one of these, it's not going to cripple your party or anything like that. You just might long rest a little more frequently than people who do use them, but as a longevity tool, as a quality of life tool, so you don't have to go back and forth to camp all the time, and for the cheese effects that it has with sorcerers in particular, you can gain a lot of benefit from that. You can also use it to cast a bunch of day-long buffs and then refresh those spell slots as well. So there's a lot of uses for this potion, and I'm going to put it in A tier. The potion of Angelic Slumber. So this is similar to the Angelic Reprieve potion, puts you to sleep for 2 turns, and if you stay asleep for those 2 full turns, then you wake up with the benefits of a long rest that restores all of your hit points, all of your spell slots, and all of your long rest abilities. It doesn't give you your short rests back for that long rest, although notably if you are a bard, it will give you your Song of Rest ability back, and so with a bard this can be used as 1 Angelic Slumber and 4 Angelic Reprieve potions all wrapped into one. If you happen to have a bard in your party, you can gain the benefits of that. And overall, being able to just gain back all your spell slots is incredibly powerful. The Angelic Reprieve potion also will reset like your illithid powers that are usable once per long rest. It'll reset your items that are usable once per long rest, so it can really help your character who has long rest based abilities go for more encounters before things get bad. It's also a powerful enough benefit, getting back all your spell slots, all your hit points, etc., that it can be worth trying to use this in combat. I don't recommend this as a default strategy, of course, but in an emergency, you can have a character try to stall for 2 turns while a character who's out of resources uses an Angelic Slumber potion. Like the Banishment spell on a boss can be used to just stall for 2 turns while your other character gets back all of their spells and hit points. So that kind of tactic in combat can actually be used very effectively with the Angelic Slumber potion. You can be like inside of a globe of invulnerability with it as well in order to get back all of your hit points and spells and so on. So there's actually in combat uses to this one as well. Not that there aren't to the Angelic Reprieve potion, but the Slumber potion has much more powerful effect, so it's much more worth going out of your way to try to use this in combat. In fact, I think that the ability to make your adventuring days longer and the power of restoring all of your spell slots in combat uses is going to bump the Angelic Slumber potion all the way up to S tier. I think that this is an incredibly powerful effect. It is actually useful in some circumstances in combat, and it's obviously incredibly useful out of combat, and I highly recommend stockpiling these and using them, especially because there are adventuring days where you need a long rest but don't want to go back to camp because it'll cause story events to fire or something like that. The Angelic Slumber potion can get around that issue, and also if there are quest lines that are timed, you need to complete them before long resting for whatever reason, of which there are several in the game, the Angelic Slumber potion can make that much, much easier. So definitely keep an eye out for these. Stockpile as many as you can. They're fairly rare and difficult to find, but they're absolutely worth picking up. Very powerful potion, S tier. The Potion of Flying. So the Potion of Flying is exactly the same as the level 3 spell of the same name. It gives you flight for 10 turns, which allows you to use your movement speed to move up to 60 feet with flying movement. So you can fly to areas vertically, you can bypass abysses, you can jump over chasms, and so on. Now, flying in Baldur's Gate is actually hopping, it's not really flying. You have to land in between every movement, and you can't like fly way up into the sky out of range of people, but it's still a pretty powerful mobility tool. As we talked about with the Glorious Vaulting potion, the ability to reposition up to 60 feet with more or less impunity every turn is very powerful in a lot of combats. It lets you go up and down from vertical areas very easily. It's not quite as strong as free Misty Step every turn, but it's pretty close, and just getting a free Misty Step every turn for 10 turns is a massively powerful effect, and so even though the flying potion isn't as powerful as it maybe sounds like it is, it's still very, very powerful. I'm not a huge fan of the flying spell because it costs you a level 3 spell and costs you your concentration, but the potion doesn't have any of those problems. In exchange for your bonus action, you get all of the power of this very powerful spell without any of the associated costs. And so flying potions just are the king of mobility in Baldur's Gate, and absolutely worth picking up for any character who can grab them. The ability to reposition away from melee enemies, to reach archers or ranged characters with ease, to go up and down on vertical terrain and make use of terrain much more effectively for your party, cannot be overstated how powerful that is, and it just gives you so many mobility options. Both Gaseous Form and Glorious Vaulting are sort of lesser versions of the flying potion, and so combining those two effects into one effect in some ways is what flying potion does, and that obviously is very powerful in and of itself. And just having tons of mobility throughout an encounter is so valuable that I think you should stockpile as many of these as you can find. You should craft as many of these as you can find. S tier potion for sure. The Potion of Invisibility. So this works again exactly the same as the spell of the same name, which is a level 2 spell that requires concentration. So right away, you're getting a second level spell slot and not spending your concentration on something that's very powerful. Invisibility is mostly useful outside of combat in order to like steal stuff or get to areas that you're not supposed to be able to get, but has a lot of in-combat uses as well. If your character is in trouble, you can drink an invisibility potion and they won't be targeted. You can also just use this as a bonus action to get advantage on your next attack, which, while you can often do that by hiding, that's not available in every arena because you might be in a lit area or whatever, and the invisibility potion can be used to spend a bonus action, take an attack with advantage, and that's actually a totally reasonable use of a bonus action and a potion, in addition to all the other things that it does. A character who is in a really bad spot can turn invisible. You can use it to bait enemies to chase a character down and then turn invisible so they are very far out of position. You can use it to get into areas where you're not supposed to be able to get. You can use it before you start combat to position your party perfectly around the area. The invisibility potion has a lot of uses. Now, many characters who want this effect can just hide instead, and many characters who want this effect will be better off with Sanctuary cast from an ally, or with to protect them, or with simply having the invisibility spell available for out-of-combat stuff. But the invisibility potion comes up pretty frequently, is very useful in combat. and out of combat, and it's just a very good potion overall. I'm going to put it in A tier because it helps you solve story events and has combat uses, and it would definitely be reasonable for every character to carry one of these. I don't think you'd really need to go out of your way to stockpile them, but when you have them, you should think about when it would be useful to use one at the end of your turn, especially, because it can be a character who is about to take a beating can always use an invisibility potion to prevent that, and that's just a very powerful thing to be able to do. Next up, the 4 drugs, which we're covering because they have the same effect as potions. You drink them and something happens. These can't be thrown, so you can only use them on the character who is actually holding the drug, and they have some slight differences to how they work with potions, which I'll talk about when we get to the ones with positive effects. First up, Dream Mist, which is one that has only negative effects. You drink it and you have to pass a constitution save, or you get knocked out for 3 rounds. Obviously, this is not a good potion and you don't want it. We're going to put it in F tier. This is not something that you should be going out of your way to do. Knocking your character out has very few useful applications, so probably avoid the Dream Mist in combat. Useful for role-playing, but nothing else. The Essence of Ether. So this puts you to sleep. It's similar to Dream Mist, but without the saving throw. It puts you to sleep for 2 rounds, and you cannot use it as a throwing weapon or anything like that. So it's like an Angelic Reprieve potion, but without the positive effect. Obviously, another one to avoid. F tier for the Essence of Ether as well. Next up, Silkroot. So Silkroot, similar to Dream Mist and Essence of Ether, cannot be thrown, and when drunk, gives your character for 3 rounds disadvantage on dexterity and charisma checks. Now, this is checks, not saving throws, so it will only apply to skill checks. And maybe you have a role-playing reason why you really want to attempt but fail a persuasion check or something, but obviously this is a strict disadvantage in most circumstances. I can't think of a reason why you would want to make it harder for you to pass one of these checks, maybe for a story reason, but obviously otherwise we're going to avoid the Silkroot. Now, you're probably wondering at this point why I bothered to rate these drugs at all, since we've placed 3 of them in F tier already, and the reason is this last one, the Terazul. Terazul is alone amongst the drugs in having a positive effect as well as a downside, but what a positive effect. I don't see this one talked about very often, which is surprising to me because it is ludicrously powerful. What Terazul does is it gives you the Terazul Jitters, which is identical to the Haste spell. For 2 turns, you get an additional action, move 30 feet faster, and have +2 to your armor class, and then at the end of those 2 turns, you fall unconscious, similar to a potion of speed. So it's a potion of speed that lasts for only 2 turns instead of 3, but importantly with the Terazul, it stacks with existing sources of haste. You can get 2 additional actions if you consume a Terazul and a potion of speed, or have an extra cast of haste from somewhere, and that is ludicrously powerful. The other thing that Terazul does that's different and more powerful than potions of speed in some ways is that it requires no action at all to consume. It doesn't take your bonus action to use it. So you can wait until you're in combat and use it without costing you any resources and get 2 full turns of haste from that again stack with existing sources of haste to make your character an unstoppable wrecking ball. I'm very surprised that I haven't seen too many people talking about this item because it is absolutely busted, as haste that stacks with itself is just a ridiculously powerful effect that should not exist in the game, and you absolutely should grab as many of these Terazuls as you can get because it's broken. 2 full turns of double haste is, I don't really, I think, need to go on and on about how good that is, although I already have to some extent. But despite, for some reason, this not being really on the radar for build guides and optimization, this item is insane, and you should absolutely buy as many of them as you see. And finally, the Elixir of Universal Resistance. So the Universal Resistant Elixir is called an elixir and listed as an elixir in the game files, but it's not. It doesn't use your elixir slot. It won't replace an existing elixir that you have, and it only lasts for 10 turns. So it works exactly the same as any other potion, and is definitely a potion, which is why I'm covering it in this tier list. It gives you resistance to all damage, universal resistance, halving all incoming damage for 10 full rounds, which is an awfully long time, and that is a pretty significant buff to your character's survivability. This is great because it's basically a superior healing potion every turn that you get to cast ahead of time, and so then you can use it in combination with healing potions to last even longer in combat. It is very useful for specific important fights. Any fight, especially where there's a lot of ambient damage or AoE damage going around, this can be very useful to keep your party from succumbing to that damage. It can also be used on any character who's about to tank a whole bunch of damage from an enemy. If you have gotten a powerful enemy locked down in melee with your melee fighters, especially if you have a character with Sentinel or something, the Universal Resistance Elixir can be very helpful to allow them to survive through that. And so it's just a very powerful potion. Resistance in Dungeons & Dragons is a relatively rare effect that's relatively hard to get, especially resistance to physical damage, which the Universal Resistance Elixir applies. And so having resistance to magical physical damage, which is quite difficult to accomplish, and something that you'll take like several class levels in Wildheart Bear Barbarian in order to get, is just very powerful. It lets any character tank through just about everything and will keep your party alive through things they have no business surviving. Universal resistance elixirs are excellent. The only thing holding them back is that they're very expensive and very hard to get. The ingredients are quite rare, but you can buy a lot of them, but you can still buy a lot of them because gold is relatively easy to come by in Baldur's Gate, and for important combats they are invaluable. S tier for the Universal Resistance Elixir. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this potions tier list. This was a really interesting one to do, and really made me think a lot about the potions in ways that I hadn't otherwise, because trying to compare them in some ways doesn't actually make a lot of sense, because there's so little opportunity cost associated with potions. You can just have all of these all at once, so you don't really have to make a choice between which ones you're going to pick up and which ones you aren't. You can just have them all. Still, I think it's useful to go over what they all do and how they can all be used, and I hope that you found this useful, and if you think that I've misplaced any of them, definitely do let me know in the comments. I'm always very open to suggestions and feedback if you think that I've misplaced any of the potions, or have anything that you think should be moved around for whatever reason, definitely do let me know. As always, of course, if you have enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a comment and like the video. Both of those things help me out a ton with the algorithm, so I do really appreciate it when people take their time to do that. I know that your time is valuable, so, you know, it means a lot to me when people take the time to leave a comment. Hit the like button and so on. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 guides and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.